Hi, I'm Noam Wasserman, Dean of the Syms School of Business at Yeshiva University. I was a longtime professor at Harvard Business School, an entrepreneur, and a venture capitalist. I wrote the bestseller, The Founder's Dilemmas.
And I'm Charlie Harary. I've been working with companies for over 10 years. And that book, Founder's Dilemmas, and the challenges faced by the 10,000 founders in it is the basis of this podcast. We are delving into the issues faced by startups to help you avoid the pitfalls that claim so many good companies.
Let's get started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Founders Dilemmas podcast. We did something a little special tonight, and I hope that you enjoy it. We're actually doing a live fireside chat with an incredible person. And so this will be a little bit of a different part of our podcast series. Hope you enjoyed the episodes until now, and we look forward to today. So, Dean, kick us off. What do you have for us today?
So tonight we get to feature Julie Feder. Julie was a graduate of Syms 30 years ago, graduated with her major in accounting. And then we're going to hear a bit of how she built on that foundation, a lot of the key decisions she faced along the way that we can learn from, and how she took her company, Aura Biosciences, public a year ago. And so we'll be able to trace from the pre-founding of Julie's life all the way through the exit. She is now still in the company, so she hasn't exited, but the company had the IPO on the NASDAQ a year ago. After Syms, she went and worked for Deloitte & Touche, doing a bunch of things around audits and a variety of other classic accounting things, but then headed a little bit more in the finance direction. After that, she worked for Genzyme, had some things having to do with when a company buys another one, integrating the finance teams. And so a variety of other things that she got into from a strategic and an organizational perspective. Aura is actually her third CFO gig. And so she had two other ones before Aura. The most interesting of those, especially given the acronym of the name of the organization, it was a nonprofit called the...
I called it CHAI. I called it CHAI, but everyone else referred to it as CHAI. The CHAI.
The Clinton Health
Access Initiative.
So CHAI. And so getting in for 6 years, being able to do a bunch of the CFO things for them, also a variety of strategic games that she was able to have input into. And so we'll be able to delve into a little bit into that earlier career set of experiences and how it coalesced into the role that she was able to play at Aura and is playing at Aura right now within the CFO role. And so without further ado, let's dive into understanding a little bit of that. Though actually, just to back up a little bit, we also have here in the audience the next generation of the Feders, a class of 2019 graduate from Syms. And so we now have the multi-generational impact. Julie and her daughter both sporting that diploma on their wall. Maybe another couple of Feders coming along after
Next year.
Possibly coming to YU. She is also half of a YU couple, and so other illustrious things. And we'll also hopefully have time to get into some of the Osek B'Tzarchei Tzibor, the contributing to the community that she's able to do. She's the co-chair of the board of the Maimonides School in Boston. And so why that interested her, how she waded into those waters, and how she's able to, she hates the word balance, but how she is able to balance all of these different pieces of her life is some of the other things that we'll hopefully get into, and hear some questions from our audience about the things that she is doing. So without further ado, Charlie, you want me to take it away, or do you want to do it?
Why don't you open with the first question?
Okay, so let's talk about the career decisions that you made along the path, the highs that you've seen, the lows that you've seen, both yourself and other people make. What were some of the best moves first that you made when you were building your career?
So great question. I'm really not blowing smoke. I know that you're all Syms students, and I actually truly mean it, that my first step into the finance world was starting at Syms. I really wanted to be a preschool teacher. I really did. And I got the bug and I went to Syms, and I really never looked back. So I was in your chair, and I just want to tell you, I didn't appreciate it when I was in your chair, but trust me, when you look back 10, 15, God help me, 30 years later, you're really going to appreciate the experience you had here. So one, starting and investing in what you're doing right now was really step one for me as a key to success. I would say two other things that really push me to where I'm going, and one is to network. And that doesn't mean that just in the business sense. You all go to shul, you go to camp, you go to programs, you go to Shabbatonim, you go to people's houses for the weekend. You never know who you're going to meet in the next chair sitting next to you. So this was something that I didn't focus on till later in my career, but really taking the time to introduce yourself to people, talk to people, and learn from their experiences is really going to help you as you go to the next level. And then I guess the last thing for me, and people like my uncles and my dad and my husband for sure, really, really focusing on your work ethic. I take it very personally. This is super important to me. I never left work early on a Friday I always left work early on a Friday. Let me rephrase. I always left on time on Friday, but I made sure that my work was done and somebody didn't have to do it for me. It's really, really important. If I could do it, each one of you can do it. And being really mindful of your work ethic and being an example for the people around you is critically important. You'll be recognized for it, and it'll help you get to the next level. So those are some of the things I would comment on.
Take us a little bit through the journey a little bit, in hearing Chai, and now, I also thought it was Chai, which is great, and now at Aura. I bet you when you first started, you never would have thought that you'd be a CFO leading a company into an IPO. And yet that happens to people sometimes. They end up in places they never really expected. So take us a little bit through that, sort of the quick overview as to how the pieces fell together for you. Yeah,
it's actually just a really incredibly special story. So when I was at Deloitte, one of my largest clients was a company called Genzyme. It was a very, very special biotech company. It really treated very rare diseases. And the CEO then, may he rest in peace, was really the grandfather of biotech, and his name was Henry Tamir. And he made all 11,000 of us feel that we were saving lives. I mean, it didn't matter if you were in accounts payable or if you were the head of a business unit, everybody had a role in saving lives. And when Genzyme was purchased by Sanofi, Henry and the CFO at the time, Mike Wisga, really encouraged me, you should be a CFO, you should be a CFO. I thought they were crazy. I went on a number of interviews and I got introduced to the folks at Chai. I call it Chai because quite literally we were saving millions of lives around the globe. I mean, quite literally that's what we did every single day. And I was given the opportunity, someone who was never a CFO before, I was given the keys to the kingdom. And I was told, here are the keys, help us figure it out. And that was my first foray into having the opportunity to really, truly, strategically think about how to get these drugs to different parts of Africa, how to make sure that children were no longer going to die because they weren't vaccinated. I mean, it was, I was inspired to save the world, and I was able to do it through finance, and it's so rare, and it's so special. So when I left, I was at Chai for 6 years. I lived through Hillary Clinton's election, which you can imagine was not an easy time for Hillary or for me. I wanted to go back to biotech. I was given the opportunity to be a CFO of a public biotech company, and I chose it because the CEO at the time was a former CFO. And I felt it was such an opportunity for me to learn the ropes of being a CFO in a public company from a CFO. He afforded me the opportunity to really branch out and learn and really rise to that level in the public markets. My last stop, which is my current stop, which is one of the greatest opportunities of my career, I met the current CEO, and her name is Dr. Ellie De Los Pinos, and she's a scientist all around. She's one of the scientific founders. She did her PhD in cancer research. She is the typical science person. She had me at hello, guys. Okay, I'm really not kidding. The science is extraordinary. It's quite literally, I believe, going to change the treatment paradigm of how we treat cancer. Quite literally, my personal opinion. Caveat: I'm not speaking as the CFO of Chai because it's not appropriate. But I came to this company because she afforded me the opportunity to be the lead person and really to be the strategic, financial, and operations lead, because that wasn't what she wanted to do. She wanted to focus on the science. So for me, I took something from each opportunity and I brought it to the next one.
Wow.
Okay, heading into the downsides before we get into the details around Aura and stuff like that. Observations about mistakes, observations about pitfalls that our listeners might be able to avoid?
Listen, we all make mistakes, okay? Just always know that the decision you make doesn't have to be the last decision you're ever going to make. You can always change, you can always improve, you can always do better. I would just say a couple of things. I mentor a lot of young people. I always tell people, don't just take the job at Amazon because you think it's a great named company, right? Don't just take the job at Staples because it's a really big company. You really need to look at opportunities for what the job is, but even more importantly, who you're working with and who you're working for. And if we just go back to that concept of work ethic, for me, I have a need to work with people who like to work like I work, who really truly believe that doing the right thing, no matter how hard that doing the right thing is, that it's the right thing to do and you will always choose that path. So don't pick a company because your friend goes there or they have really great benefits. Pick a company because you really believe in what they're doing and you really want to have that experience. You know, I'll just say two things. I worked for many years at a company where one time, I'd been there for many, many years, and a leader of that company sat me down one day and said, how is it possible, Julie, that you are going to go and become a partner if you cannot take your clients to dinner on Friday night? I'm telling you guys, someone like quite literally asked me that. I was flabbergasted. I thought that was I've been working there for years. I've never gone out for dinner on a Friday night, and I thought I was doing pretty well. And I took a moment, I didn't respond right away, and I said, you know, I really appreciate your feedback. It hasn't been a problem for me till now. If you think it's a problem, we should discuss it further. And I really just shut the conversation down because it was quite frankly inappropriate. That was not a company I want to work for, and I made my decision to leave. So when you're looking at opportunities, you should be upfront. I observe Sabbath. I cannot work Friday nights and Saturdays. I have to take off for the Jewish holidays because even though you might really want the job, if they are not going to support you in that, you will never be successful there. Okay? I'll say one other, if it's okay, one other quick example here. When I was taking the company public last year, I was so panicked because we were going to try to maybe go a little bit earlier in the year, and we decided to go around September, and we all know what happens in September, right? And before you take your company public, you go on what's called testing the waters, and you meet with 100 investors, and you try to understand if they're interested in your company, and you share your story, and it's a very robust process. I sat down with the lead bankers, and I said, okay, there are 9 days in September for us to have 100 meetings. And they literally, this is what the head banker, who by the way was a man, said, no problem, tell us the 9 days and we're going to schedule it. And 99 of the 100 interviews were scheduled over those 9 days. One was rescheduled and I couldn't attend. That's truly remarkable that they had enough respect for me that 99 people they scheduled around my schedule. So guys, don't go for a company just because of the name, and don't go for a company if you're not going to tell them that you wear a kippah on an interview or you have to leave early on Fridays. It's not a win-win for anybody.
You know, it's interesting you say that, and I want to put a flag on getting you to take us a little bit further deeper into the going public process, which is a fascinating process.
I love it, sure.
But there's something else I don't want to miss, which is this idea of will. It feels very much in your story, both in your story with regards to the religious connection you have and your faith not being for sale, and in your desire to take on really ambiguous roles. To me, that feels like the driver of success in general and in your career, which is the will. The will to say, I'll do it. It's difficult, but whatever. It's 9 days. You'll figure it out. Yep. I'm not going to move. And so if my will is strong, the world will adapt. How much of that is part of the success of this, which is having that ability to take on challenges and really not being too I'm saying this in a positive way, not always succumbing to the things that are in front of you?
You know, this is applicable to our lives, both professional and personal. right? You have to know what your beliefs are and what are your priorities. So there's a thing I like to, there's a little bit of an example that I always like to share with people, right? If you think about a juggler, okay, and a juggler has 3 balls. This is sort of getting to the balance question also, but a juggler has 3 balls and they can really, for all day, juggle those 3 balls and not drop them if they're professional, right? Well, we're all professionals, right? So I can do 3 balls with my eyes closed. It's the other 100 that have to be rubber, that if you drop it, you try to do 7, those cool ones, you drop one, it bounces back and there's no ramifications. But if you drop one of your 3 balls that are glass, your 3 main balls, they will shatter, and it's incredibly difficult to put it back together. So at any point in time, I always think to myself, what are my 3 glass balls? Now, there are days that I pick it in the morning, not quite literally, but you know what I mean. Sometimes I change them by the week, sometimes I change them by the year, sometimes it's hour to hour, right? Sometimes a glass ball is my family, sometimes it's my SEC filing, sometimes it's exercise, sometimes it's my children, lots of times it's my children, okay? So, but you have those 3 glass balls, and if you keep your mind on what those 3 glass balls are, and you're passionate that those are the right 3 glass balls, you will be successful because those are the 3 balls that you're not going to drop. Everything else is going to bounce back. So I think the other thing is, when you think about it, I'm not knocking Staples. Staples is amazing. I shop there. It's fantastic. But I really don't think that I could possibly get excited as a finance person counting paper clips and Staples. I really think I can get excited about talking about the next drug that's going to change the lives of people with cancer. So you need to find that thing that you're passionate about. You're not going to find it in your first job, and you probably aren't going to find it in your second job. But if you keep at it and you keep improving your skills, you're going to find it, and it's going to change your life.
That's great. That's. Can I double click now? And I appreciate the detour for this, because I think this is absolutely critical for life. Can you take us a little bit in behind the curtain? Going public is something that everybody thinks about. Everybody wants to, at least, I know a lot of people, myself included, dream of one day being on the exchange and ringing a bell, or being in that world, and even the concept of going public. Take us a little bit through the process. Does the company at some point realize that it has the chance? Does it need the money? Is it an incredible lift internally? Share with us a little bit what took place internally at that company when you realized and ultimately you went public.
Yeah, so great question. Really, that's a big all-consuming question. So let's break it down. Listen, the markets since 2020 have been really difficult. Let's take a walk down memory lane, shall we? A global pandemic, impact on supply chain, less people at clinical sites. I mean, it was a rough time in the public markets. The markets, there's no explanation for the XBI where it is and NASDAQ where it is. I joined Aura about a little over 4 years ago. We had an ongoing study, a phase 1b2 study, which is your first or second study when you're getting a drug approved. We knew we were moving to our second route of administration for that drug. But what was much more important for us was that we knew that over the next 6, 12 to 24 months, we had very meaningful milestones, clinical regulatory milestones that were going to generate value for the company. It's critically important when you're going out to become or to be, or if you have been, many of those companies that went out with crazy valuations in 2020 and 2021 were preclinical companies. They were companies who were years away from human trials, years away. I knew that I was a year away from starting my pivotal trial for approval, hopefully. So where we were a late stage biotech company. And when you think about a biotech company, what's the golden rule? You need to have a drug. We have a drug. It's called belzupicaps-sarotalacan. It's a little blue vial of liquid. It's a virus-like drug conjugate. It's never been manufactured or developed before. We knew we had the story, okay? You never go out and raise capital because you need capital. It's a terrible way to raise money. You're never going to get a good deal. We had money in the bank. We didn't go public because we needed the money. It's really hard to raise capital when you need the money. We went out because we knew that we had a drug. I'm a CFO. We believed that we had a drug. We knew that we had positive data in our first study. We knew the data from our second study was looking positive, and we knew we had clinical and regulatory milestones in the short and longer term that investors would appreciate and ascribe value to it. That's what drove us to take the company public.
Mm-hmm.
What were the major things that had to change in order to be able to get the company ready for it? And how did your life as a CFO change from startup into getting ready for it?
Another loaded question. Listen, I'm going to just tell you one story in order to answer that question. Okay, when I interviewed at Aura, I met with he was a former board member, and his question to me was, frankly, he was a little nasty, I'll be honest, but his question to me was, "You've never taken a company public before. Why do you think you can do it?" So here's a lesson. Never answer right away when you want to say something, like think before you speak. Because that question, I took a moment to say, because you know what I probably was going to say, which probably wouldn't have gotten me the job. So I paused for a minute, and the reality is, when you take a company public, the bankers and the lawyers are going to hand you a 100-page checklist, let's say, and it's going to literally list step by step what you have to do every single day. I knew that. I worked in a public company. I knew what it was all about. And my answer to this guy was, great question. I can understand why you would ask me that question, because you're right, I've never taken a company public. But I can do a checklist as well as anybody. So when the lawyers hand me a checklist, I can follow it and we're going to be fine. But what really changes and what a company really needs to pay attention to is the governance and the compliance. We were able to tell our story. I mean, my CEO can tell that story better than anybody. I can even tell the story. I mean, I can say glycosaminoglycans and I'm a CFO. You know what I mean? It's like amazing. So you telling the story isn't a problem because we had an amazing story. Having the right team wasn't a problem. I had an amazing team. Having a supportive investor syndicate and board wasn't a problem. I already had that. The big change for us was putting in that rigor around governance and compliance. It's annoying. It's the most painful part. Writing policies, making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, have all the board committees, making sure everybody shows up, making sure you have all the documents for all your articles of incorporation, and really, it's the tedious what's on the checklist stuff. Once you could get past that, and frankly, guys, you can hire lawyers to do it. You know what I mean? I didn't have to do it all myself. The most important thing when you take a company public is, and this is an important lesson for whatever you do, I truly believe I am only as successful as the people that are around me, okay? People above me, people next to me, people that work for me. I'm only going to be successful if everyone else around me is successful. So when I thought about taking this company public, I think it was critically important for me that my org team, right, 60 to 80 people, lawyers, auditors, bankers, consultants, IR firm people, I mean, literally anybody you could think of that's going to participate. It was like 60 to 80 people. I made sure to surround myself with the best and the brightest. I didn't go with a bulge bracket because I knew that those guys were super busy. I was a little engine that could. I went with the mid-level banks, with the Leerinks and the Cowens and the Evercores and the BTIGs. I handpicked those banks. I handpicked those bankers because I needed people that were going to work hard for me. And I needed people who were going to be with me along on this journey and who were going to stay with me after I went public. So for me, it's finding who those right people are, who believe in your story and who are going to tell it for you.
Right, and so much of, it's interesting, so much of one's growth in life I find to be, there's a shift that takes place, right? What brings you here doesn't take you there. And that as you begin your career and as you start your life, a lot of it is figuring out what you're good at. And there's a lot of, like you said, the work ethic. But as you start to grow in your career, as you said, you really can't get there alone. That's right. And that's a critical piece. What was it like? Take us, if you can, close to the moment, right? So now you're going public, you're doing the roadshow or the investors and the compliance, the documents, all that stuff. Get us sort of close to the goal line. I'm saying we're in the red zone right now. I'm saying, like, take us in. It's first and goal.
Yeah.
So what does that feel like as you get closer and closer?
It's literally the most stressful thing you've ever experienced in your life. I'll tell you, I did not sleep for 6 months. And quite literally, my daughter was back in the city, COVID was easing up a little. I literally moved into her room and I basically didn't leave the room for 6 months. Because it's all consuming. I mean, even when you're sleeping, you're thinking about it. I literally stayed awake for longer than I care to admit. But after the testing of the waters, which happens over a few week period of time, then you say, okay, based on those meetings, I think we can put together a syndicate. I think we have the interest that's out there. And then you go into what they call the roadshow, and it's a much shorter period of time. It's about 4 or 5 days. We did it in 3 or 4. You have meetings with those same investors and some other investors. I think we met with 30 or 40 people over those 3.5 days. And those investors then go and to the banks and say, I'm interested. This is how much I want to put. I want to put an order in. Now, mind you, the week of my roadshow was one of the worst weeks of 2021 for the market. I mean, it was literally crashing. There were companies that went public a year before that were trading at 50% market where they were. Like if they went out at $14 a share, they were trading at $7 or even lower, right? It was really a tough market. We were being priced. We were talking to the banks. We were pricing between $14 and $16. And we knew we had the money around the table. So at that time, it was very important that if you were going out to the public markets, you should go out with a deal size that you already have the money around the table. We were very fortunate because I have a very supportive syndicate who's been with me for a while and truly believes in this story and the value it's creating. But there were a number of new investors that wanted to come in. So you do all these meetings, you meet with the banks every night, and Wednesday night you have the final meeting of the go, no go.
With whom?
With the banks. Well, with your whole org. It's the banks, the lawyers, the auditors are on. And that
What's the feeling in that room?
That was a tough night.
I have to slow it down for a second. You walk and take us into it. You walk into a room and you're
it was all Zoom because it was COVID. It was all Zoom. Which, by the way, you can meet with a lot more people when you do it by Zoom instead of running around New York, California, and Denver, and Boston. So it was one of the most stressful. I would say it was the second most stressful because Thursday, when you do the pricing call, you're like having a heart attack, okay, right? It's like a heart attack. There was one investor I really felt strongly I wanted in the syndicate, and they hadn't yet put in an order. And I'll tell you guys, the market was horrible. There was a clear reason not to do this deal, okay? It was clear. I'm telling you though, I truly believed this is the right thing. When you go from private to public, the opportunity and the options to raising capital are like so many more. I mean, it's triple, quadruple, whatever. There are so many more options as a public company to fund your company than when you're private. It's remarkable. I really wanted this. I really wanted this company to go. And I pled my case with the board. My CEO pled the case. And we said, okay, we're going to give it one more day. We'll price tomorrow. Needless to say, I did not sleep Wednesday night, okay? I would say at about 11 o'clock, I was talking with a group of the banks, one bank in particular, and they told me something that I hadn't thought of. And they said, Julie, nobody ever pulled an IPO and got a better deal. Nobody. They went back. I asked them 3 days before, give me an example of a company that was on the road, pulled a deal, and got a better deal. They couldn't find one. So that for me was like, if I already have the money around the table, why wouldn't I take this company public? Next year, the deal's going to be worse, okay? Who knew what was going to be in January? Like, what am I waiting for till January? I'm in the middle of a global pandemic. It's not getting any better. Flu season's coming. Really? You want me to wait till January and do it again? The backlog of IPOs was extraordinary, okay?
Wait, before you tell us what happens, just 1 second. That concludes the first episode of Founders Dilemmas podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. You can email us your questions at foundersdilemmaspodcast@gmail.com. Join us for the next episode to find out what actually happens and if the company goes public. I'm here with Julie Feder, Dean Wasserman, and thank you for joining us on today's podcast. Check out the next episode for what happens next.